Okay. Go ahead, Bryna. And welcome, everybody. So this is Bryna O'Sullivan. She's going to do the program tonight. And if you have any questions, I'm sure she can ask them after the program. So, Bryna, what's the name of your company?
Charter Oak Genealogy.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will get started. So for those of you that are comfortable using the chat, I did just add my slides to the chat, so you can double click on them and save them to your computer. My name is Bryna O'Sullivan. I am based in Middletown, and I am a professional genealogist. So our plan for this evening is to give you a little overview of something called house history. House history is essentially the genealogy of houses. The way I'm covering it tonight has two possible benefits. You can use this to research your own home, or you can research your ancestors' homes. We'll start first by talking a little bit about land records, and then we'll talk about ways that you can learn more about who lived in your house. If you have questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. I will keep an eye on that. And then I will make sure that we have time at the end where everybody can unmute and discuss. So let's get started. So this is a map from 1813 from the Library of Congress. I'm using this format so that we can change back and forth between screens as needed. So please be patient with me. Connecticut's land records are unique. If you've been doing house history or genealogy or family history for a while, most people go right to the county seat. Connecticut does not store land records that way. Connecticut is one of 3 states to store land records on the town level. Rhode Island and Vermont are the others. So for Connecticut, land records are stored by the town or city clerk, not the county clerk or county recorder. And this is what makes Connecticut's research particularly challenging. Land records are stored in the town in which the land was located at the time the transaction occurred. Why does that matter? Here's that 1813 map again. You can see the Connecticut town layout, including the notch here. Here is a map from 1971. The shape of Connecticut has not changed very much between 1813 and 1971, but the number of towns has changed substantially. Because Connecticut town boundaries have changed so much over time, the records of the same property can be in 3 or more towns. Thankfully, the Connecticut State Library has given us a little bit of a cheat sheet. There is a website, and this is linked in your handout, which is also in the chat, entitled List of Connecticut Towns and Counties, including year established. This is the live link. This is what the top of the page looks like. It's currently 169 towns. And here's the entry for Suffield. So Suffield is in Hartford County. It was created in 1674, but it was created in 1674 by the state of Massachusetts. It was annexed to Connecticut in May of 1749. What does that mean? Records prior to May 1749 are part of Massachusetts's land records. They are most likely, and I'm guessing to some extent, I have not tracked this down fully, filed with the records of Hampden County, Massachusetts, which would be due north of town now. So this is the case in Suffield. That means a property that was purchased in Suffield prior to May of 1749. The deed is going to be in Massachusetts. Step one to finding a Connecticut land record is identifying the town, or in this case, the county the property was in at the time. Massachusetts keeps their deeds on the county level. Connecticut does not. So Suffield land records prior to May 1749 are going to be in the Massachusetts County Land Records. After May of 1749 will be held by the Suffield Town Clerk. This will depend highly on the town that you're researching. I mentioned Saybrook, Connecticut earlier. Saybrook, Connecticut, at the time it was created, included a number of towns, including modern-day Essex, modern-day Old Saybrook, Lyme, and more. The records for the properties that remained in Saybrook are now filed in the town of Deep River because Saybrook changed its name to Deep River in the 1940s. You can see how this would get complicated quickly. So step one to finding a land record is always identify the town or county in which the property was at the time. Step two to finding a land record is to determine how to access the records of that town. Connecticut has 169 towns. That basically has meant we have 169 different systems for record keeping. A good place to start is with a web search for the town clerk and the town clerk's office and the town name. On that website, you want to check and see if the town clerk has any records digitized and or accessible online. Some have records digitized that are not accessible online. In most cases, if they're digitized, they are accessible online. But very few towns have all of their records digitized. Next, you'll want to check to see what's available on Family Search. And finally, determine what you'll need to visit the vault to access. So in the majority of Connecticut towns, some records, usually the older ones, have been digitized by Family Search. The newer records have been digitized by the town clerk, and there's a 60 to 80 year gap in the middle for which there are only paper copies. However, Suffield's town clerk, per the discussion I had with the office this week, has digitized all of their land records and has them searchable from the mid-1980s on. Do be aware that if you are searching on the town clerk's website, you may have to pay an access fee, and you will have to pay a fee to print records. That is not true if you're using Family Search. So in the case of Suffield, there is some fee schedule required. The Suffield land records are on Record Hub. If I understand correctly, they currently have a free access, but you need to pay $2 a page to save images. Family Search, on the other hand, has completely free access. However, the records go from 1747 to 1911 instead of to the present, and the index only goes up to 1885. If you are trying to access Connecticut land records, they generally can only be accessed from a Family Search affiliate. They cannot be accessed from home. It's not true for every town. I know East Havens are accessible from home. To find a Family Search affiliate, you would go to familysearch.org. If you have not dealt with this website before, it's free. It's run by the Church of the Latter-day Saints. To set up an account, you just click on Create an Account. You will never be asked for any sort of payment information. They will ask for your email. Once you have an account set up, to find an affiliate, come back and click on that question mark. Click on Find a Family History Center and Family Search Affiliate Libraries. It will pull up a map. You can enter your location, and it will give you options. There is a closer Family History Center, but the closest Family Search affiliate appears to be the Connecticut State Library. Why am I recommending an affiliate over a Family History Center? So again, if you haven't used Family Search before, they have 3 levels of contracts. The lowest level are the items available from home. Then you have the items that are required to have access to an affiliate. Then you have the Family History Center. So the Family History Center has access to the most records. However, they also have very limited hours. So if you are looking for a record group that is accessible from an affiliate, you generally want to go to an affiliate. We have a note, thank you, that the library has applied to be an affiliate library. I will tell you, I pulled my records from an affiliate in this case. So before we get into searching the records, does anyone have any questions? Please feel free to throw questions in the chat. If not, we can save them towards the end and then unmute at that point. Okay, to search the records, again, this is searching from Family Search. We're going to familysearch.org, clicking on Search, familysearch.org, click on Search, and then Catalog. So Family Search, Search, Catalog. It will pull up this catalog page. In the place, you are going to put in the state, if you know it, the county, but it will generally fill in on its own, and then the town. That is because Family Search stores records on the level that they were created. So again, in Connecticut, we're dealing with town land records. So state, county, town. They use county because most states use the county system. Ours is no longer extant. So again, search, catalog, state, county, town. Why am I emphasizing this? Because there's more than just land records on here. If you're interested in family history, check this out. Search, catalog, state, county, town, click search. And this is what will come up. So you'll note we have cemeteries, we have church records, probate files, vital records, and more. In this case, we're clicking on land records. This is the catalog entry. And my first stop is the general index. This is showing a locked key over a camera because when I took these pictures, I took them from home. The collection was not open. When you go into the affiliate, you'll see just the camera. When you're starting with the land records, the first thing you're going to look for is the index file. Do be aware if you're using Family Search and not the town clerk's records, Family Search did not always digitize every index. The town clerk's indexes are generally more complete. So if that's an option, that's something you do want to check. In this case, we'd be using the Family Search index. We'll see what we find. So as I mentioned earlier, you start with the town clerk, check Family Search, and then figure out what's not digitized. In the vast majority of Connecticut towns, Family Search digitized records into the early 1900s. The town clerk has digitized records from the 1980s on. You have a gap in the middle. You will have to go to the vault in those cases. The vault is the physical storage location for the original paper records. It's part of the town clerk's office. Do be aware that some of the larger communities have two. So I'm in Middletown, we have two vaults. If I'm looking for records from the 1700s, the older records are in the overflow vault. They're in the basement. Any questions before we continue? Okay, step 3 to finding a land record. You actually want to access the records. Your first step, no matter what, is to check the grantor-grantee index for the volume and page. Grantor is the seller. That's every deed listed by the person selling it. Grantee is the buyer, so the grantee index would list every person buying. Be sure to check both indexes to make sure you find all the deeds for your property. In Connecticut, it is fully possible for a property to pass by probate and therefore not have a sale listed. In one memorable case, I've also seen property that passed by a minister's lease, so it was granted by the town as a lease, and the family started buying and selling it. Not sure how that's going to work out when that lease expires, but that's what happened. Once you have the volume and page, you do want to pull or locate and copy the deed. If you are trying to ease into this a little more simply, and you are looking at your own property, do tax field cards can provide you the most recent volume and page of sales for your property as a place to start. If you can't find a listing, you do have to remember that land could be passed by will rather than sale. Be sure to check probate. Any questions before we get into a case study? Okay, because I was using family tax, I looked for the Revolutionary War era Kents instead of the Kent family that's responsible for the library name. I'll show you this site a little bit more later. Normally, I'd start with a specific family name or property address, but this is my trick for when I create presentations. In this case, I used a blog called Historic Buildings of Connecticut to identify a property with a potentially interesting history. So looking for the Elihu Kent Jr. house dating from 1786. So if we're looking for purchases or sales, we are going back to Family Search, Search, and then Catalog. So Family Search, Search, and then Catalog. State, county, town, land records, catalog page, start with the grantor-grantee index. So the first question I had was, when did he purchase his land? So we're looking for Elihu Kent Jr. So I went into the Ks, particularly the KE, in the reverse index. This is the grantee listing. You'll see right here, let me try to blow it up just a little bit. All of these listings theoretically cover Elihu Kent Jr. So any of these could potentially cover the purchase of the land on which the home was built. We're looking from 1792 back to the early 1770s. I pulled two deeds that look like they might be related, but I could have checked all of them fairly quickly. So the question we have is, do these deeds cover our property? Do they cover the Elihu Kent Jr. house? This is a typical deed format. So we have Elihu Kent Jr. from Major Elihu Kent, to all people to whom these presents shall come greeting. This is what we call boilerplate. It's formatting that was used very legalese, and it was used over and over and over again. So you'll see these on almost every deed. The handwritten sections are what we're focusing on. So to all people to whom these presents shall come greeting, know ye that I, Elihu Kent Sr. of Suffield, in the county of Hartford and state of Connecticut, that's the grantor, for the consideration of £200 sterling, I believe, forgive me, I can't fully read that with this not blown up far enough. Received to my full satisfaction of Elihu Kent Jr. of Suffield aforesaid, that's our grantee, do give, grant, bargain, sell, confirm, and confirm unto the said Elihu Kent Jr., his heirs and assigns forever. So anyone that wanted to inherit it or anyone that wanted to purchase it. One piece of land in said Suffield, known by the name of Fremington Lot, bounding east on a highway, north on land belonging to the heirs of Thomas Norton, late of said Suffield, deceased, west on Muddy Brook, south partly on land belonging to the heirs of said Norton, deceased, and partly on my own land, being about 10 acres, be it more or less. So this is a Mets and bounds description. This is what you'll see very commonly in the colonial period. Do not be shocked if you see this with your ancestors' deeds or your own home's deeds. Basically, they're describing the property by the neighbors. So this property bounds east on the highway, so the highway should run right along its east end. North on land belonging to the heirs of Thomas Norton. West on Muddy Brook, so Muddy Brook should be on its western bound. South on land belonging to the heirs of Norton. And partially on my own land. This is volume 5, page 320. We also have volume 7, page 71. Again, Elihu Jr. from Major Kent. One certain piece of land in Suffield, where I now live, called by the name of my home lot, bounding east on the highway or town street, north on land belonging to the heirs of Thomas Norton, west on land belonging to said deceased heirs, south on land belonging to David Todd, taking the whole of the island containing 10 acres more or less with the buildings thereon. Those of you that know the area sound like our property, you'll note that the house is on 161 South Main Street. I would say it's probably a pretty good shot. Home lot, just so you're aware, is often used to describe the site of the family's primary residence. So a way to check would be, where was Elihu Kent Sr. living? We could also use the term Fremington Lot, which was likely used to describe the area for an extended period, and the location might appear on a map. I want to ask what your thoughts are and ask if there are any questions. Please feel free to unmute yourself. We'll take some questions now before we change topics.
Hi, I have a quick question. I'm sorry, would you mind just repeating what you said? If we were looking for land records within the gap of the late 1900s to the 1980s, what did you say would be the best option for that?
It's going to depend on the town. So the key question is, what town was the property located in? So Suffield has everything digitized. If you're willing to pay the fee, you can use the town clerk's listing on the website to search for everything. In the vast majority of towns, you will have to go into the town clerk's office to make that search.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
And when you were reading that deed, you read the word island. I looked at that word and I wasn't sure what it was, and I can't imagine what the island would be doing at that point. Do you have a comment on that?
That is a really good question because that is definitely Land. Whether I am misreading the first two letters, I'm not specifically sure. I would be curious to see if you could fully identify what his home lot looked like to see if there was a better option, because this certainly does look like, let me so everyone else can see it, the word island.
I see the word there, and it definitely looks like ISLAND, but I can't imagine 10 acres of that location. Oh, by the way, bounding west on Muddy Brook is quite clear, and east on South Main Street. But the island, I've never seen that word used in that fashion. They often spoke of the island, but that's over in the Connecticut River.
Yeah, I wonder if it says inland.
That would be possible, but from that context, I'm not sure what that would particularly mean.
In the whole of the island containing, etc., is very strange.
And what's interesting to me, it's the same amount of acreage, but I don't think these two deeds cover precisely the same property. The bounds are different if you look at the two deeds side by side, and one indicates a presence of buildings. So it looks like one section is built upon and one of them is not.
The second one also doesn't say bounded by Muddy Brook.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what makes me think this covers two different properties. This is one of the bigger challenges you'll be dealing with when you get back to the colonial period. You are entirely dependent on the neighbors to identify the property.
Then Ella, you can have two different properties, Lester?
Oh, yes. But I've always been puzzled as to whether it was junior and senior. But
Yeah.
Kip Moncrief's house is also Elihu Kent.
So my understanding would be from this particular deed, he purchased his father's home lot. And the home lot is typically the farm or property on which the family is living. So this deed should refer to his father's house. Where that house is located would be an interesting question. Other questions? Yep.
Yeah. By the way, I'm going to go look at that deed again myself and see if I can understand it a little more. It is very nice that you too find it puzzling. Thank you.
I will be curious to hear what you find. Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's get into the fun stuff. The land records are just the starting point in the story. So beyond that, we have the questions of what else can we learn? What can we learn about how the houses were constructed? What can we learn about who lived there? What can we learn about what the neighbors look like? A good place to start when you're doing any form of house research are architectural surveys. Architectural history is a little bit different from what we typically do in house history. They're looking at the constructions of the buildings. The Historic American Building Survey is actually the one works progress administration project that is still ongoing. So it was started by the WPA in the 1930s and it's still running. All of these links are in your handout, just so you're aware. The Historic American Building Survey has had most of its recent content digitized by the Library of Congress and includes photos, home plans, and a lot more. So for example, we have a photo from 1958 of the Burbank Hathaway, let me get this correct, Burbank Hathaway Barns and Carriage House that were on Main Street at the time. So if your property is on here, you'll be able to tell what it looked like in 1958. Back to the search results. Now this includes a lot more than just photos. What is accessible and available will be dependent on town. You'll see we have a lot of interior photos of the Burbank Hathaway House. You will find that we actually have surveys of some properties. So here are some of the surveys. This is an architectural survey of the Harvey Bissell House, including the placement of doors, etc. And from these, you can learn details of the home's construction, the home's history. You can get a glimpse of what it looked like. This is particularly of interest if the property has changed dramatically or, unfortunately, in some Connecticut towns, has been torn down since these were done. There are 117 listings for Suffield on here. You will have plenty of time to dig through and find out some basics. Now, this is not the complete file by any means. This is a selection. There is an earlier collection that was the original WPA collection. The Connecticut State Library has digitized that collection. If you download your handout and save it to your computer, you should be able to click right to this. These photos are from the 1930s. So we have a 1701 dwelling, faces east at 11 High Street. We have one from 1718, faces west on East Street. You click on the link, you'll be able to pull up the photo, and you'll be able to get some basic history of the property. If it was known, they included the original owner. These were not always accurate, but they did try to make a guess. We also have the present owner, the location, some basic construction material, and more. So this at the time was believed to be the Edmund Marshall House, also known as the Mansion House, in 1935 to 1937. It was owned by Alberta Greer. Now, do be aware if you're working throughout the state that some state libraries do have the original forms that supplemented the WPA's original survey. So when we're dealing with the contemporary version, we call it the Historic Americans Building Survey. When we're dealing with the 1930s, it's often called the WPA Architectural Survey or the Old House Survey. So again, the contemporary one is on the Library of Congress. The 1930s has been digitized for the Connecticut State Library. Always ask around in the community because the original notes may still be extant. Now, there are numerous other architectural surveys available. If you have a property that's on the Historic Register, those have been digitized as well. Again, this link is in your handout. You can go down to the bottom of the page, click on Search by State. And then I can limit it to Connecticut and work my way through to find the appropriate section. Another good locale to search for architectural surveys is UConn's link on the Connecticut Digital Archive. You may have to do a little bit of browsing, but they have architectural surveys for a number of Connecticut towns. So you're not completely confused. I set this in a little bit of a strange place. The UConn link is on page 2 of your handout, not page 1. Everything else we looked at was on page 1. Any questions about the architectural survey? I'm covering things fast so that we can cover the material. If you've never looked at them in detail, they include photos, plans, and much, much more. So we have Summers, Ridgefield, etc. here. Any questions before we get into maps? The maps are one of my favorite things to play with. So there are some excellent map collections that can be key to helping understand the layout of the community, seeing who your ancestors were living next to, etc., etc. UConn, University of Connecticut, has a Magic Historical Map Collection page that allows you to search by town for historical. You'll note we have to do a little bit of rolling to get to the appropriate town. You can make this faster by searching, but here is Suffield, dating from 1868. So you could use this to identify your ancestors' neighbors. As you'll note, we have property owners listed by name. The David Rumsey Historic Map Collection is housed at Stanford University. Their collection is somewhat eclectic, but they do have listings for Suffield. Clearly not in any great detail, but it is an option. This is from the late 1890s, early 1890s. This is 1893. They've marked off a few things that they thought were relevant at the time, which can help you determine locales. And then my favorite, the Sanborn Fire Insurance Maps. These are great fun. So the collection I'm showing you is a feature of the Connecticut State Library. To access it, you would need to go to the Connecticut State Library website, click on Get a Library Card. Make sure you get a library card, follow the instructions. Once you have your library card, you'll go to Collections, Databases, Collections and Databases. So get your Connecticut State Library card, go Collections, Databases. Wait for it to load correctly. Click on S for the Sanborn Fire Insurance. It's right there. You'll be prompted to log in. Once you're logged in, this is what you'll see. So the Sanborn Fire Insurance Company started in the mid-19th century as a way to evaluate the cost of fire insurance, making maps. The Connecticut State Library has a link to the Connecticut specific collections. So we're going to go click on Connecticut, click on Suffield. Let's start with 1885, just to give you an idea of what we're looking at. So the key will help you to determine what the buildings were made of at the time. And then you'll quickly see the advantage to the use of these maps. You can see that there were a series of horse sheds behind the Baptist church, for example. Here's the Suffield Hotel. Connecticut Literary Institution. I believe that's a well-known facility now. First Congregational Church, and more. You can follow these maps decade by decade. So we have 1898, 1905, 1912, and 1925. By the 1920s, they typically have some form of color. This version does not. If you ever see the color, be sure to check the keys. Color will tell you what the building is made of. And just to see the difference, you can see the city becoming much more crowded as we move on through time. Here's the Connecticut Valley Tobacco Association, for example. So the Library of Congress does have a limited Sanborn fire insurance map collection. The Connecticut State Library has subscribed to the digital version that does allow you far more access. I'm going to show you one more map collection that does not specifically cover Suffield, but is one of my favorites. The Library of Congress has a panoramic map collection. If you're not familiar with panoramic maps, think of them as the 19th and early 20th century version of Google Earth. This is my hometown of Middletown in 1877. This will take a minute to load. And I would guess you can fairly quickly figure out why I enjoy these so much. You literally can walk street by street by street through the panoramic maps. So for example, if I look for the library in Middletown, it's on Broad Street. And this is what was at the time the Episcopal Church, or I think had been 10 years before becoming the public library. These are a fun way to glimpse what the town looked like in the past. You can also often follow them 10 or 15 or 50 years later. Here's Middletown in 1915. If this ever happens, just simply reload. I'm again looking for Broad Street. Here it is. Same building. You'll notice a home that was here in 1877 is gone, so is one that was here. So again, this is the panoramic map collection from the Library of Congress. Link is on the bottom of the first page of your handout. You also have possible map collections that may have some useful information in the New York Public Library, Yale University, and more. If you're ever looking for old photos, be sure to check out ctdigitalarchive.org. It's the Connecticut Digital Archive. Doesn't have the best search function on the planet, but you can put in Suffield and see what you get. You'll note fairly quickly we have 12,000 possible options, including some material, I believe, tied to the Kent Memorial Library. Here is an image from Suffield, dated 1834. If you're interested in learning more about specific homes, you have some reference books available in your handout. If you're ever interested in more of the history, I mentioned Historic Buildings of Connecticut earlier. This is that site. Please ignore the ads. They tend to get a little strange. This is every property that he has previously profiled. And you can go through and pull up a mini history of a property based on his website. Never forget to check out what the library or the Historical Society has available as well. There are often photograph collections that many of us are just not thinking to use. So I'm going to stop there to make sure that we have time for questions, and please feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Fran. I was looking for the handout. I'm not seeing it in the chat.
Let me put it back in, because once in a while it does not load if you haven't logged in when it's on. Let me also put my slides into the chat one more time.
Okay, thank you.
Questions?
I do see the handout, but I can't seem to download it. I mean, I get all zip files and a whole bunch of stuff on it. How do I do that?
I'm also going to Well, let's make this easier. I'm going to put my email into the chat. Feel free to send me an email if you're having issues downloading any of this. I'll email it to you directly.
Sounds good. Thanks.
If anyone's feeling overwhelmed, please ask any questions you have. This is a lot of material very quickly. I skipped a lot of stuff tonight. The key to getting started is just truly being patient with yourself. Your starting point is the question, where was this property at the time? If you have that, you know the town. Once you know the town, start thinking about how do I access the land records. Once you have the land records, then you can start looking at the other options. Does anyone have questions even about a specific property?
This is Fran again. I live on Hill Street in the historic district, and I've done some research on my own, and I think I've pieced together who the landowners were, but I haven't been able to find land records that support that. But kind of through other information that I've gathered, determined that pretty much the home that I'm in has been pretty much in the same family until my husband bought it in 1996. Did you want to, you said it, somebody had a specific, I guess.
So you were looking for probably, it sounds like support for what you found thus far.
Support, and I'd like to find more old photos. I don't know that I found 2 photos so far. Delphina Clark did a great job of documenting a lot of the homes in Suffield. And I was able to find some information and some history from that. And that's what I built my research on.
If I'm not mistaken, forgive me, I'm going to pull this up just to confirm. I believe she did the original WPA survey.
Oh, did she?
So let me just double check that. So that would be the information that would have been available. Yep, Mrs. Clark. So that was the information that was available in the 1930s. One good question would be, has something been done since then? So the Connecticut Office for Historic Preservation can often tell you if there is a more recent architectural survey.
Okay.
That would be a good place to start at the minimum. And
Okay.
beyond that, if you can build into, forgive me, I lost my train of thought. If you are willing to do a little bit of poking around and checking out things like the Connecticut Digital Archive, a number of items have ended up there that are not necessarily from the locales that you'd expect. So if you're thinking Suffield, you're often checking the Suffield. You're checking the library and you're checking the Historical Society. But you may have material from far other locations. So it looks like we have a lot on here. That's a possibility. This is, again, the CT Digital Archive website. This is being run out of UConn, and they're allowing organizations to scan material and place it online that way. It's a good way to start finding out what's out there.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? I know we had the question if I had any interesting stories from my research. That case I mentioned about the minister's lease getting resold by the family, that came up when I was preparing one of these presentations. It made for a very interesting presentation. So Connecticut was officially a Congregationalist state till 1818. And in order to attract a minister, the towns would lease land to the minister. It was a perk. Basically, it was, you want to live here, we'll give you a 1,000-year lease to the property. Here's the caveat. A lot of those families turned around and probated the land or sold it. We're still within those 1,000 years. I'm not entirely sure what the town's going to do at the end of it. Because you're now 3 homeowners later, and the town still technically owns the land. Other questions or comments?
Yeah, so I sort of have a question. So I'm looking into digitalizing the historical room at the library. And I've talked to the state library, talked to the Connecticut Historical Museum and Hartford Public Library. And they say that they use the Connecticut, not the Yukon one, but the state library to upload images in and use it as a location, a server, I guess. As so I just, I thought that was an interesting concept, so that you don't really have to pay for a location. You can get them when you need them.
So most of the organizations I know are using this currently. I believe there's a fairly good amount of storage space on it. And my understanding is that it's hosted at Yukon, but it's not part of Yukon.
Okay, so we're talking about Yukon and not the state library? Okay, so
my understanding is that this is hosted out of Yukon, but I could be wrong. I have not worked with them directly.
Okay.
But this is what the state library is using for their new sites. This is here.
Okay, so that must be what it is, yeah. So,
Yeah.
So I wonder how permanent that is.
It's been extant for the last couple of years. My understanding is that it's intended to be permanent. I don't know what the funding looks like long term.
Now, I would just wonder if down the line you'd be charged for storage.
I truly don't know what's going to happen long term. My understanding from the libraries are doing it. It's been affordable thus far.
Okay.
The challenge, unfortunately, is for users. It's not the world's most user-friendly site, and most researchers don't know it exists. Good news is if you can find it, you get some excellent material, but it's finding it that's a challenge.
Right. But I guess, a lot of places don't use it necessarily for the intention of research for the people, but to store their items so that they can, if they want to do an exhibit, display, they can grab them and use them.
It's been a bit of a toss-up from what I understand. Some of the libraries are using it for things that they would like to have digitized for researchers, but are too big to be affordably hosted on their own sites.
Sorry, it's sort of an offbeat question, but
No, that's okay. I've had these discussions, so it's a great one. Other questions? I know this ends up being a topic that people have to play with a little bit to be comfortable. Let me go ahead and put my email into the chat one more time just to make sure that you have it as questions arise. Don't be shocked if you're doing the land records research if things start feeling very complicated in the mid-19th century. It's the switch from street addresses to the Mets and Bounds system we mentioned. It can be really hard. One of the bits of advice I have as you're going backwards, if you're tracing somebody and they own multiple pieces of property, try to match the descriptions because there will often be something that just isn't right. So you'll see that a property is bounded on a cemetery and you know that yours is not. You can remove that one. It will help you as you're going backwards. Okay, let me stop screen sharing and ask if anybody has any other questions. So we had questions about my genealogy project. Send me an email. I'll gladly discuss that via email. And you had a question?
I guess my first thing is, so really the first place to start is to contact the town and start with the land records in a town. So if our house, which I think was originally a business, it was a blacksmith shop before it was a house, a home. So it seems like I should start with the land records and then start to see if you have a name.
So it is often most effective to work backwards. Start
Okay.
with the most recent information you have just because you're more likely to know it.
Okay.
So you probably know when you bought your house.
Yep.
Who did you buy it from?
Yep.
Who
We know
did
that.
they buy it from?
Yep. Know that.
And you can follow them backwards, and it can help you determine if there were property changes.
Okay.
So you may have a description of the property that you know is your land, but it doesn't match the house because the house has changed. It's things like that that can really help you build in the timeline. That timeline is what you'll need to do maps, etc.
Okay. Good idea.
And be patient with yourself. This is really hard. I've been doing it for a long time, and I will tell you, I still struggle.
It's such an interesting thought, though. If we're not a registered historic. We're in the historic district, but we are not a registered historic home. And about 1785 or no, 1875. Excuse me.
And honestly, it's often worth checking out just to see because there are tax benefits to all of this stuff. That if you do happen to qualify, you may be able to qualify for some tax benefits as well.
Okay. Thank you. It was very interesting. It is, there's a lot, but it's just like you said, you got to start somewhere.
Good luck. Any other questions or comments?
This is a wonderful survey of the subject.
Thank you. That's good to hear.
I agree. Thank you so much. I have 3 pages of notes.
And please feel free to send me emails. I know it's a lot the first time and you'll have questions later.
Thanks, Bryna. It was great.
Thank you all.
I didn't realize it was such a daunting subject, but now I can see that it is.
We have probably one of the most complex land record systems in the country simply because it's been kept on the town level. And I know where I am, we do see properties that the records are in 3 different towns. The house hasn't moved, town did. Okay, well, thank you all so much for coming. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to send me an email.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bryna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.